Hello and welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Steve Kaufman, editor of the Jackson Sun. Today we're joined by Dr. Verna Ruffin, who is the new superintendent of the Jackson-Madison County School System. Welcome, Dr. Ruffin.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being on our program, and welcome to West Tennessee.
Well, it's great to be here.
In preparation for this program, I started reviewing some of the clips in the newspaper that led up to your hiring. Your first day on the job was actually July 1st, but that was kind of the end of a long process that began even late last year. And looking back through it, it struck me it was almost like a reality TV show in terms of the many different layers you had to go through with interviews and re-interviews and visits, and it was all open to the public. What got you through that months-long process?
I was very hopeful that things were going to work out the way that it was intended. And so while it was a lengthy process, I think it was also a great experience and prepared me for my actual first day.
Before coming to Jackson, for folks who don't know, you were in an administrative position, fairly high level, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And could you tell us just a little bit about what that job was?
Absolutely. When I first moved to Tulsa to assume the position, it was as an area superintendent, where I served 19 schools that were high-need schools, very similar in the number of students as we have here in Jackson. And so that prepared me because I was the leader of the principals and had a tremendous amount of responsibility and accountability for making and working with them and for achieving progress. Then I became the assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction. And that was during a huge transition of central office, and I had a large staff there and responsible for working with several people, and particularly proud of a staff development teacher project where we really worked with hiring some experts to go out in schools for job-embedded professional development. Then I became the assistant superintendent for the academic achievement zone, which placed me in a position once again to work with some high-need schools and to work with the staff to bring about school transformation and change. I was only in that position for a few short months, and then I accepted the position here.
You were, as we said, in a fairly high-level position. I'm imagining you were at a point in your career that you could have put in a couple of more years there in Tulsa and retired. What drove you to seek a position like this?
I'm not ready to retire at all. I just knew that I wanted to work in a school system with a board that was really going to have very ambitious goals to improve their school system. And I wanted to be superintendent. I wanted to have an opportunity to work with not only the board but also the community, and to be able to make some effective changes that were going to impact children. So I had a passion for doing that. I didn't want to just put in some time. I wanted to make a difference. And when this opportunity came along, it was like a dream come true, actually.
And talk about why Jackson in particular. Our school system has some challenges. Last state report card, I think, C's and D's. Not the greatest report card. We certainly have plenty of strengths, but we have some serious challenges. We don't necessarily have a great record when it comes to our performance of our school board and relationships with county commissioners. What would make you want to walk into that type of situation? Well,
I do believe that I have, and I bring to the table a lot of experience working with diverse groups. And diverse groups meaning not always people agree with how things are supposed to work. And I think I've been very successful in working in that kind of environment. I also love challenges. And I knew that whenever I was going to be selected as a superintendent, it was probably going to be in a place that was undergoing some kind of challenge. And I was preparing myself to be able to go there and create some unity within the various groups, because we have to have some commonality. There has to be something that we want to achieve that we can sit at the table and agree, even if it's just one thing. I also knew that I wanted to complete my doctorate, and I thought that I was going to complete my doctorate and then apply for positions of superintendent. But I actually was contacted about the position here in Jackson, and I was asked to take a look at it to see if it's something that I was interested in. So it came at a time when I was really I was not expecting it. And when I looked at Jackson and I looked at some of the data and I looked at some of the challenges that people were having here, I felt that I was the one to be able to come and work with this community that appeared to really want things to happen.
Yeah, you noted the in terms of the timing of it, I believe when the search was going on, there were other candidates that had other fires in the iron, if you will. And I remember distinctly that you said, this is the only position I'm looking at right now.
Yes, it is.
You talk about bringing people together. How, as a superintendent, can you promote that? Can you be a vehicle for that?
Well, I do believe that there has to be something in common that people want to achieve. For Jackson, it must be a unified vision about what we want for our children, and I think that comes in many different ways. For instance, if it's economic development, then you know you have to develop people to be able to achieve that goal. If it's good stewards of your money, then you need to align that with strategic goals and plans, and it has to be for a purpose. Well, that purpose has to be student achievement, student learning. If you're looking at it from a parent, you want the very best education for your child. If you're looking at it from a position of moving into real estate, you want to move and have people locate in an area that will be prosperous for children and for families. So there has to be something in common that we bring to the table. So starting from that point, I believe that that could be something that unifies people, even though we do not always agree how to get there.
You talk about challenging situations and bringing people together. You ran into one on your very first official day of work when the county commission voted very late in the budget game to remove about $900,000 from the school budget. This was money that was earmarked for computer purchases, I believe. You can correct me on that, or if it was other things involved. Your first official day of work, that happens. What's your reaction? Well,
it was welcome to Jackson. And so you said that you wanted to be superintendent. Here's challenge number one. And that's basically how I viewed that. I didn't anticipate that I was going to start with that kind of a challenge, but it's a starting point. We know what we have. We know what we are absent of. And so we go to the table. I believe the commissioners have a valid concern about wanting to know how we're spending the money, and I do believe we're going to be able to demonstrate that. I hope that they are going to be willing to listen, because the comprehensive plan that we will bring to them is going to be more than just a plan to have computers in a classroom. It always was more than just computers in a classroom with me. It was never a matter of bringing computers into the classroom for testing. If we were going to bring computers in the classroom for testing alone, that is certainly not my vision. So I view that as an opportunity.
Yeah, and I think there probably is some confusion in the community about that, and I think it may have been presented in different ways. You know, as someone watching and reading what's going on, I saw kind of two issues. I saw one, this issue of computers needed to take standardized tests, not this coming school year, but the next, and that was one issue. And then there's the wider issue going on of technology used in education, you know, as part of the curriculum in the teacher's hands, in the student's hands. Those are two different things, or are they one and the same?
They're actually two different things. I believe that the conversation should be, how are we going to incorporate technology as a teaching tool? So you're teaching, you're learning, you're also using it as an opportunity to expand beyond the school. So for those purposes, I really believe you have to mesh the technology, the tool, with teaching and learning, which incorporates the curriculum, with professional development, which brings about how are we going to deliver that? How are we going to learn how to do something that we've never done before? We have isolated cases where people are very proficient in using technology, but how do you get that into the hands of someone who's perhaps resistant? And I think that that wider issue is not just putting the tools in the hands of children, but putting the tools and the resources and the training in the hands of everyone that touches the school system.
Yeah, I think in a lot of people's minds it's probably, oh, they just want to replace textbooks with laptops or iPads or whatever the device may be, but it's much, much deeper than that. It's how you're going to teach the children.
Absolutely. It's much deeper than that. And it brings about some wider issues, and not so much issues but concerns as to what do we do with that technology when kids go home and they perhaps do not have that. So I believe that the broader issue involves our being able to bring to the table the right stakeholders to have that conversation.
As part of this exploration that you're talking about going through, you plan to put together, is it a task force to kind of help bring this plan together, to present it to all those involved, including the commissioners? Talk about that a little bit.
Yes, I believe that internally, our central office staff, along with some of our principals and teachers, need to devise a framework for that plan. Some of the very basics and essentials that we need, and that may include how many of the devices we would need to have in our schools. That's a general framework for that kind of work. And then I would like to pursue an advisory, and that advisory would have various groups from our community. Certainly it would involve our board. I would like to invite 2 to 3 members of the commissioner to serve on that committee, because we have to have that common vision. Definitely want to include our students, because our students can tell us a lot about what we need to have with technology, and I think students have been left out. I'd also like to bring in some of our teachers, content areas, not just teachers who would use the technology, but teachers that can use the technology in math, science, language arts, and social studies. So content is very important in this plan, as well as our principals. You know, this can touch a lot of different people and a lot of stakeholders. A lot is at stake here. I'd like to also invite JEA to the table, because I think JEA provides us with opportunities to expand beyond the school system that impacts the school system. So I'd like to bring them to the table in an advisory group. And I think that advisory group can take a look at this framework that we're going to provide, and they can ask questions, they can ask for more work, they could bring some resources to the table to help us be successful.
Why or how would potentially having that kind of technology in teachers and students' hands ultimately help us get from C's and D's to A's and B's or B's and C's? How would that improve learning potentially?
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons when you look at student achievement data, for instance. You know, you look at how students are perhaps performing in math and in English and reading, and that provides you with one snapshot of what could or could not be happening in the school. But you have other things that could contribute to that. For instance, student engagement. Are students interested in what they're learning? Are they using some antiquated books or resources that we could facilitate by having state-of-the-art technology, which gives you access to a broader range of resources? And if you select those resources carefully, if the teachers are at the table and selecting resources that could help you, you're looking at not just the academic portion, but other things that contribute to academic excellence for children, such as engagement. You know, you could improve discipline. If you're putting students out of school at a very high rate, then you have to look at student engagement. Why is that happening? I do believe that when students are actively involved in something that they feel is a meaningful experience, you're probably going to get students to come to school more. You're probably going to get them to engage in their learning more, and that affects what happens academically.
You mentioned diversity when we were talking earlier. You are the first person of color to serve in this position as superintendent in Jackson-Madison County, a school system that is 60% black. Race is often an issue, not only in education itself, but in the politics and decision-making surrounding it, be it the school board or the county commission. How do you think your ethnicity and background will factor into those situations? Do you think it will help?
I can't say that I think that it would help. I think what it brings is, and I think what it says is that people in Jackson-Madison County were looking for the best candidate to be able to get the job done. And they perhaps were looking for that top candidate regardless of race. I would certainly hope that my being here can serve as a positive model for many different people. For people of color, absolutely. For women, absolutely. But also for all people, because I think it gives people an opportunity to know that you can get hired based on your credentials and based on your talents and your abilities, and not simply just on your race.
Talk a little bit about your leadership style. During the interview process, you described it as collaborative. What does that mean? How does that work?
Well, I think part of it you might be able to see in the way that I would like to form those committees, because I think very many voices come to the table when you're making a decision. Sometimes, years ago perhaps, you know, people would just make decisions from the position of power and authority. And I think that's great because you're capable of doing that. But I think you're more empowered when you can bring people in with some diverse opinions. You may not have that common opinion about how you want to get something accomplished, but you can all agree that you have to accomplish something. So I think bringing those voices to the table. I think when you ask, you have to be willing to listen to what people are going to tell you, whether you like it or not, because it's a part of how people will react to it. So being collaborative and bringing those voices to the table, not being afraid of having someone disagree with you, I think that's essential. And I think it's really essential right now in Jackson to be able to have that kind of conversation.
In addition to that input and collaboration, you also said that you make decisions that are data-driven.
Yes.
Explain that, particularly in terms of education and what that means.
Absolutely. When you look at the numbers, you know, you hear sometimes people tell you numbers don't lie, but you have to be able to interpret those numbers. For instance, I will give you an example. Someone said that Jackson-Madison County had over 30% of our students reading at the 3rd grade level. Well, that's incorrect. That's absolutely not true. Because we really don't know what grade levels there are. Students test in different grade levels. We have percentages of our students that are not receiving proficient or advanced in some of their particular TCAP scores. But that does not mean that we have 39% of our students reading at 3rd grade level. That's a false interpretation of data. And I've heard people say that, and it's misleading to the public. I think that when you interpret data, you have to know what is it telling you. Well, it's telling you that you have several of your students that are performing at a basic or below basic level. So if you take those numbers and you interpret that data, you know that you have to intensely respond to the needs of children that are not meeting the state test at the proficient or advanced level. That's what that data tells you. So when you're making those kinds of decisions, or when you're looking at those numbers, that tells you that your resources, the money, the teachers, the allocations, you have got to spend some time putting your resources where it will help children that are basic and below grade level. That's what that data tells you.
When you were looking at the Jackson-Madison County school system, you no doubt looked at that data. What were some conclusions that you drew from it?
I tried not to draw too many conclusions until I had an opportunity to really meet with the people. And what it was telling me that I could derive from it is that we had large numbers of students that were not successful based on your state test. It told me that you had some outstanding value added for some of our teachers in the district. So it told me that there were pockets that were making significant gains with children inside of Jackson-Madison County schools, and you had other pockets that were not making improvements at all. So that's part of what that data told me. When I looked a little deeper, and after I arrived here, I also found out that we had some professional development ongoing in the district, but we didn't necessarily have targeted professional development. At times, there was professional development at will, so to speak. But if our professional development has to meet the needs of children and meet the needs of the teachers, it really has to focus on our greatest needs. And right now, our greatest deficiencies are in reading and mathematics.
You put together a 100-day plan as you approached the job. Even I think before your first day, you had that plan together, which focused on district-wide literacy, structure at the central office, and teacher training. Does that relate to the data, how you zeroed in on those three things, or,
Yes.
or what drove you there?
Yes, it definitely did. The 100-day plan was a way of digging deeper into what was perhaps just on the outside and on the surface. So listening, that's still very much a part of that plan, really hearing what people have to say. And that does include what the commissioners have to say, because that's part of listening from their position, what they're viewing, and what are their thought processes in the entire scheme of things. I put together the literacy and the professional development because it ties into our strategic plan. And the strategic plan is what really guides us, and it's kind of a roadmap, so to speak. But it's to be taken very seriously because it tells us that we have to improve on student achievement. And it tells us we have to do that before children are in 3rd grade. And so the specific references to the literacy plan and to professional development, that's directly from our strategic plan.
That plan was a plan that really came together kind of before your arrival, I guess. And from what I recall of it, it focused pretty intensely also on the middle school areas and the need to turn around those schools. Is that something you agree with, and will that go forward?
Yes, definitely it will go forward. The middle school turnaround, we have a lot of work to do in that area. The middle school turnaround, turning around a school is more than just a term. And so there's some significant work that we have to do on the middle school level.
You were actually in Jackson a lot before July 1st, before your official start date. Talk about some of the things you were doing. I know I saw you at several community events.
Yes.
What were you up to?
Well, I was getting to know people, and hopefully having people getting to know me as well, because I think it's a two-way street. I made certain that I accepted as many invitations as I possibly could, and I received several. And so it gave me an opportunity to do some public speaking, to talk a little bit about what my vision was going to be, how we were going to work collaboratively. It gave me an opportunity to learn the city a little in navigation. Also gave me an opportunity to just do some of the listening that I wanted to do with the principals. Met with some teachers, met with the teacher organization, and had an opportunity to speak at two of the churches here. And that was fabulous. We had many of our children in Jackson, Madison County were represented into those two churches. And it was just a good experience to see our kids that were being nurtured in school as well as spiritually.
One of the things, and this was part of your 100-day plan as well, is you want to look at the structure of the district office. And I believe what you said was you weren't certain that the way it's structured now, it's structured the way that it should do the things you want it to do. What are you looking at there, and what do you want the central office to do?
I want the central office to be supportive to schools. I want the talent at the table that have the expertise to be able to help principals and help teachers, to be able to help build the capacity to do the work that we're asking them to do. I wanted to make certain that before I filled any vacant positions at the central office, I knew what the voids were. And so I took that very seriously, and I have not filled any central office positions, and I'm not going to in a hurry. I want to make certain that I also had an opportunity to develop my own leadership team, and to be clear what some of the duties are and responsibilities are, so that when schools call us or when the public calls us, we know exactly who that first point of contact is, so that they can respond quickly and accurately to the people asking questions.
You said during the selection process that you, quote, have the ability to take the district's vision and make it reality. Do you feel there is consensus on what that vision is exactly, or do we still need to establish that vision here?
I think we're developing it as we go along. I think it's very clear, and at least from what I can tell from my staff, they're very clear on what it is that I hold dear. They know that we are going to ask ourselves some critical questions when it comes to spending. They know that everything has to tie into literacy. And I think that's beginning to permeate, so to speak. People know that it's not a haphazard vision. It's one about doing what's best for children. So in that sense, I believe it's getting clear that my purpose and my vision is that we really do great things for children, and that we build the capacity to get that work done.
Talk a little bit about yourself outside of education. We've talked a lot about education in the school system here. You have a mother you're very close to who
Yes.
actually moved to Jackson with you, right? And a grown daughter. Tell
Yes.
us a little bit about your family.
Yes, my family is very dear to me. My mother is here. She's adjusted very well. And she's even come with me to the Miss Tennessee pageant, so she's had a great time since she's been here in Jackson. My daughter is still in Oklahoma, working to complete her degree in nursing, and she's doing quite well there. And my daughter's 23 years old, And she's moved with me everywhere I've gone, and I feel that now I had to pay attention to her when she said, "Mom, I really need to stay so I could finish, and I'll join you later."
Understood, yes. And I read in some of your biomaterials that you like baking and dancing.
I love to dance.
What kind
Absolutely.
of dancing?
I just love to dance, period. But it took lessons, not on a professional level, but just I love the tango. I love cha-cha. I love waltz. I just love a variety of dancing. That's just fun to me. I love to bake and cook, but I really like to bake and cook to have other people eat it more than I enjoy. I enjoy it myself too, but I love to have other people eating it.
Well, we'll have to get you hooked up if you haven't already. I know there is an active ballroom dancing group here in Jackson.
I've researched it. I found
get
that you did have. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Ruffin, unfortunately, we're out of time. I certainly want to thank you for joining us here on the program, and we want to wish you the best of luck in your new position.
Thank you very much for having me.
This edition of Newsmakers is a production of WLJT and the Jackson Sun. We'd like to thank the Jackson-Madison County Library for the use of this facility to tape our program, and we'd like to thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.